Look, let's not beat around the bush. In terms of new Herpa Wings models in 2025, we've had some incredibly bad ones and some that are okay. So definitely no consistency in terms of Herpa Wings releases. Where I, however, find my consistency is where I get my new aircraft models from, and that's of course from my new partner here on the channel, Jumbolino Model, where they don't just have reasonable prices and good service, but they also really understand what it is like being a collector, because they collect themselves. That's why I wholeheartedly can recommend them, and you can find a link to them in the video description below. With that, hello and welcome to a new episode of Review, where we today will take a closer look at an Airbus A330-300 of Air China, where we, at the front of the box have a cutout so we can get a glimpse of the aircraft model inside, and on top of the box we have the Air China branding, and well, if you were looking for any highlights, that's it. You're not getting anything more with this terrible standard box design of Herpa Wings. And here she is, the Airbus A330-300 in the current standard livery of Air China. Now, while this airline has actually been featured quite extensively in the past from Herpa Wings, both with narrow bodies and wide bodies, it's also been quite a while since we actually had the last Air China model from Herpa in scale 500. In fact, the last aircraft model was delivered in 2019, was a 737-800 with a special livery. Before that, also in 19, there was a Wings Club model of an A350 in a special livery. So yeah, it's been a while since we last had an Air China aircraft model. So how has Herpa done this time around? Of course, we know at the moment they're quite struggling with their quality. Well, let's find out how it is this time around by taking a closer look at the tail section, where we on the vertical stabilizer have the Air China branding. So from the tail we move on to the fuselage, where we do find the full registration code of the aircraft, and underneath the blue cheat lines we also have the aircraft type specification, and I can drag this out a little bit because there is nothing else to be mentioned here, as those are the details we are getting from Herpa. Apart from when we look at the very tail of the aircraft in form of the APU exhaust. And from the very tail we can then move on to the front of the aircraft, where we across the fuselage have the Air China branding or writing in English, and also in Mandarin Chinese, I do believe it is. But if I'm wrong, correct me in the comment section below. Then we of course also have the flag of the People's Republic of China. We have some static ports. We have a Star Alliance logo. But then again, that's really it. So yeah, I mean, apart from the static ports, just the bare minimum again from Herpa Wings. And it is the same, unfortunately, also around the cockpit section itself, where we have the cockpit windows with the metallic edges around that and the window wipers printed on. But then again, also here, nothing more than just the bare-boned basic standard details from Herpa Wings. Now, what we should mention, since we are around that part of the aircraft, is when we look on the top of the fuselage, we do see a set dome. I think when it comes to the placement, that's pretty much where it should be. It is slightly oversized, but I think in this case it is within acceptable margins. If we then take a look at the engines or engine nacelles, we can see they have been kept in the same grey color as the belly of the aircraft. We have the silver leading edge printed on, as well as some safety markings. But in terms of printed detailing, that's about it what we are getting from Herpa Wings. The physical detailing of the engines, I think, is pretty nice. Overall from Herpa Wings, especially here from the front, very, very nicely can see the engine fan blades. Now from the engines we move on to the wings, which we should definitely also take a closer look at, starting over the top side, where we on both sides find some printed detail. On one side we have Air China written, on the other side we have the full registration code of the aircraft, and apart from that we of course have the different flap slats and spoilers carved out quite nicely, and some different shades of grey for additional detailing. The underside of the wings again offers us the same combination of Air China and the full registration code as prints, and then overall of course also a pretty decent amount of physical detailing. The A330-300 also has winglets. This has also been executed pretty well, I think, from Herpa Wings overall, where we also find the Air China branding printed on. And then we have the landing gear. That is the standard landing gear that Herpa uses for all the Airbus A330-300 aircraft models. Good thing for the main landing gear, and also the front landing gear overall looks pretty fine, I think, except for the missing printed details. but that's something Herpa just never learns to do. On the belly of the aircraft, we do have a hole in the fuselage for a stand that is of course not included with this aircraft model, but it doesn't destroy any printed details in this case, so I guess I can live with it. But a better highlight here is simply the fact of the physical detailing of the ram air intakes. And then last but certainly not least, we do also have the doors to the cargo compartments printed on here at the back of the aircraft and also here at the front of the aircraft. So there we have it, the Airbus A330-300 in the current standard livery of Air China from Herpa Wings in scale 1 to 500. And what can we say about this aircraft model? Look, considering what Herpa has delivered to us so far this year, this, I guess, can almost be described as a good Herpa Wings model, even though it is, of course, not entirely without mistakes. But let's firstly focus on the things I think the model does well. Overall, I think the Herpa Wings A330 mold is solid. I don't really have many quarrels with that. The current Herpa tendency of putting wings in at an almost perfect 90-degree angle, I don't really see with this aircraft model, at least not the one that I have here in front of me, so I think that's good. Yes, technically the set dome is slightly oversized, but for me that is definitely within acceptable margins, and especially considering how Herpa otherwise, well, offends us with their way too big set domes. But putting the physical detailing aside, we of course also need to look at the print quality. And well, overall, yes, Herpa doesn't do much wrong with the aircraft model. I mean, we don't really have smudges, edges are clean. I didn't notice any print lines on the aircraft model, which is a big relief. But it's also hard for me to really praise the aircraft model because apart from the static ports and the safety markings on the engines, this could just as well have been a 2010 release from Herpa Wings. It just feels old. It feels like Herpa is holding back so much on us here in terms of detailing. And, well, since I said that they don't do much wrong with the print, well, of course it is a Herpa Wings model, so they do one thing wrong with the model, which we do need to, well, focus on here. And to be honest, it kind of baffles me the issue that this model has. Now, notice the blue cheat line. It goes across the entire fuselage, and on the real aircraft, it is a straight line from nose to the very tail of the aircraft. On this aircraft model, however, at the tail, it makes a slight bend downwards. And I really don't understand why it does that. It's not much, but it is there. And when we look at the aircraft model and we try to judge it, if it is really worth our, well, time and especially money, well, we have to consider that Herpa Wings has this model retailing at 45 euros. So with barely any detailing, I at least expect that the details they have on the model are correct. And yes, again, it's not bending down a lot, but it is bending down, and it shouldn't. And as I said, at these extraordinary prices that Herpa thinks their models should be, well, retailed at, well, my acceptance for these kind of mistakes is minimal. So in conclusion, it's not a bad Scale 500 aircraft model if it was released in 2010. For a 2025 release, it's just not enough for the amount of money that Herpa wants for it. And the feeling that Herpa is really holding back is just way too strong. Luckily, it is something that Herpa has to change very soon, because Either is of course also soon releasing A330s. And if Herpa doesn't want to completely fall off a cliff, well, then they need to start working on the A330 and especially on the amount of details they're putting onto their aircraft models. And with that little bit of hope, it is time to end today's episode. If you have enjoyed this review, then please feel free to leave a like. If you are new around here, why not hit subscribe? And with that, thanks so much for watching. Hope to see you soon again. I'm checking out, and bye.